Good Thursday to you, everyone. Incom 65/751. Welcome to week. Are you ready for this? Boom, bam. 11. 11 out of 16 down. That's a good thing. You know, we've enjoyed the time together, or at least I have. But I'm sure you're looking forward to the end. Okay, well, before we get started with today's video, let's end what's in this coffee cup. That is the last of the coffee. Let's see, where are we going with the cup today? Yes, there we go. Focus. Hearth and Field. You know, a cool magazine. Now, by the way, any of these things that I point up in cups or anything I do, that there's no benefit to me. It's not like I'm selling stuff. This isn't ShamWow infomercial. But this magazine I publish here occasionally. I should publish more. In fact, I think I promised them an article that I'm going to deliver on. But these are some really cool cats. Okay, just check them out. Hearth and Field. I think it's .com. You can read it online. It's free, and they're sort of stepping back and taking the slow route to look at life and all things important. All right. Okay, let's get to what we're going to do this week and then talk about what we did last week. All right. So this week we're going to continue our look at qualitative methodology. Of the two, quantitative is more frequently used. And this is my theory, not because it is necessarily more accurate, because it is easier. It's certainly less labor intense. All right, and in both cases, qualitative and quantitative analysis, there are things that emerge. Now, this is a general characterization. Okay, so this is not absolute, but quantitative analysis is really good at telling you, the would-be researcher, that something is going on. All right, there's this causing this, or at least part of this causing this. Quantitative analysis is not really good at telling you why this thing is going on. Qualitative analysis is much better at telling you the why. And the reason for that is that, they both take expressions of position, opinion, how people see things, what they feel about things. They both take those expressions and quantify them. That is, put them into numerical terms. The difference between quantitative analysis and qualitative analysis is that quantitative analysis tends to restrict by way of defined category and then code the person's response immediately into numbers. And so, a typical type of question in a quantitative analysis, what's called a Likert scale question, named for the researcher who came up with it. So, if you're lacking goals in life, come up with a quantitative analysis, you get your name put on it. Anyway, not on my bucket list. But Likert scale are statements or questions that allow the respondent to pick a category, always expressed in odd numbers. And the categories will run from strongly disagree to meh, I've got no opinion, to agree to strongly agree. So in establishing these categories, the quantitative measures, the way that it takes expression and puts it into numbers, automatically narrows the capacity of the individual responding to express themselves. Qualitative analysis, on the other hand, doesn't do that. Qualitative analysis, as you read about last week in content analysis, just lets the respondents yap on. You ask them a question and you record everything that they say, and then using and you can do this by hand, but you're crazy. Using analytical software, just like quantitative analysis uses analytical software, you start coding for words and word strings and word patterns that reveal in greater granularity, greater subtlety, what it is that people think or feel about whatever you're asking them. That's one of the benefits. It gives you a better picture as to why they're at this place, why this is happening in their minds or in terms of their behaviors. The difficulty that is encountered in doing quantitative analysis is if you don't include a lot of respondents, a lot of people in analysis speak. They're called data points. Very dehumanizing, the whole business, but so it goes. If you don't include a lot of data points, the accuracy of your analysis and conclusion suspect. Why is that? And this is one of the things that you find in history, for example, because imagine you have 100 people standing in front of you, and the means by which information about what's happening in the particular age, why things got done the way they got done, what it is that people believe, just let's say they're people from 1801, pick a date, and there's 100 of them standing in front of you. Okay. Now, the only way that those 100 people from 1801 can communicate to us, because there was no technology to record voice, there was no technology to record action and expression, no video, no camera, is through written expression. And let's say of those 100 people, only 3 knew how to read and write. And so they wrote down, well, this is what happened in our year, and this is why, and this is what we thought. Okay, so now you have a record, something that they wrote, but is it a representative record? No. You've got 3 people speaking very loudly and 97 people being absolutely mute. And so you can't take the 3 people and say, well, this is what everybody thought in 1801 about, whatever, pick a topic, like what they thought about their hearth and the field they worked in. Okay. Because you don't know. And secondly, when people are allowed to speak openly instead of being sort of bracketed in their expression, they tend to, most people, okay, tend to be emotive. They put a lot of emphasis behind what they say, because that's one of the difficult things to take into account for is how intensely one individual registers something, feels something, as opposed to another individual. Now, interestingly, between certain demographics, there are marked differences. So, for instance, we know by way of the data and from sociological research that women, as a demographic, females, register negative emotion at a much higher level than males do. Okay. Now, does it mean that the event is much more negative and consequential because it's registered at a higher level? Well, it depends on how you look at it. I mean, I'm often amused and puzzled by this sort of crossover phenomenon between how it feels and how it's recorded in things like the weather, meteorological data. You see this all the time. The temperature outside is, and then you get a temperature, and now we're moving into spring, and it's just bloody hot here. Jeez, man, I don't know what's going on. But the temperature is, I live in a region of the country with high humidity. So it'll say the temperature is 88, but it feels like 95. Okay. Now, I would argue that it doesn't feel like it's 95. It is 95. Why? Because the only way that I encounter temperature that is meaningful to me is how I feel it. I don't look at the thermometer and go, oh, well, it's only 88. But the fact that I'm dehydrating here, and this, I'm actually drawing on a real example. I was on trail this last weekend and the thermometer said 88, but the heat index said it feels like 95. So I don't hump along with my pack on my back going, well, lucky me, it's only 88, but it feels like 95. No, but my body is sweating and exerting itself as if it were 95. So the perception sometimes is the phenomenon, because the phenomenon is how it's being experienced by the individual. So if you don't get a lot of data points, you can get, certain clusters of individuals because of difference in demographics, or just certain individuals because of personality that express their experience of the phenomenon that you're asking about really forcefully. But that doesn't mean it's representative of the whole group. So you've got to have a lot of data points in qualitative analysis to get good external validity to say, okay, this applies to everybody out there. And that takes work. It takes work to code everything that they say. It takes work to run it through the software. It takes work to put it into data that you can make sense out of. And, we're sort of hardwired as creatures to do the minimal amount to get the maximum return. So that's one of the big dividers. All right. Now, because if you feel that, well, I'm just, in terms of how I look at the world and how I analyze things, I'm sort of qualitatively inclined, as most people that end up in fields like communication, because it's a relational activity. Frankly, actually, on that note, between you and me, I don't think communication belongs in the hard sciences. This is just my opinion. Heresy, I realize. I think it belongs in the humanities. It belongs in the arts. Okay. But oh man, does it struggle? Oh, it works so hard to be accepted as a hard science. Please take us seriously. I think we're barking up the wrong tree. Just my opinion. All right. That's what we're doing this week. Let's take a look at last week, what you said. Let's see if we can add anything to that is meaningful. Okay, question numero uno. According to Stacks et al., how should we define content analysis? How might we measure the success of a given content analysis? Just as I was saying. Daryl, let's see what you have to say. Public relations researchers use content analysis often to conduct their studies. This is simply the ability to look at the qualitative data in a quantitative manner, and maybe, and that's true. Maybe to distinguish between qualitative and quantitative, you could say, look at, to code expression in numerically. Okay, that doesn't necessarily mean it's quantified, because you don't want to let people think that you're mixing those two up. Quantitative manner, according to Stacks 2017. So often people downplay and think that the use of qualitative data does not carry merit. I don't know if I agree with that. I think that they shy away from it because it's much more labor intensive. And then there's this weird prejudice, no other way to put it, about numbers that they're somehow truer as symbols that represent things than letters, which are also symbols that represent, that signify concepts. Numbers are symbols that signify concepts. Letters are symbols that signify concepts. Same. Anyway, let's go back to you. But content analysis approach researchers change that type of thinking. Content analysis allows researchers to break up data from interviews, observations, focus groups, and place that data into units, and from units into categories. Yeah, good. As a final result, take categorical data, then quantify it. Consequently, there are some limitations to content analysis, such as recording actual messages in the data collection. Because you start breaking it apart into fragments. But the success of content analysis outweighs its limitations. And I think if you get out into a research role, or you're with an outfit that does research, that the limitation is the time and money. Another way to determine what will be the system of categories, the last way to determine success of content analysis is to see if the validity has been compromised in the process of data collection through questionable sampling populations. In other words, this is how you test external validity. Okay, yeah, great. Now, if you were to see this question on an exam, okay, it might be something like, define content analysis, or which of the following best defines content analysis, something like that. Okay. All right. Question number 2. Consider Stacks et al. Treatment of the reliability coefficient, that is the RC. What is the RC? Explain how each of the elements R, M, N of the calculation of RC, what they mean. What's the relationship of RC to pi? We're back to numbers again. Okay. Again, if you saw a question on this, I would simply be asking you in a way that you could demonstrate that A, you know what these things mean, and B, if asked to discuss it a little bit, you could do that. You don't have to become the statistician. Okay, Ashley, let's see what you did. Reliability coefficient represents the level of agreement between 2 or more coders. Okay, very important, because when you we'll get back to you here, Ashley, but when you take a bunch of, let's say you've got like 1,000 interviews, that would be a lot. Ugh, I get tired just thinking about that. All right, and you're asking them, what do you think about the war with Iran? Okay. And they tell you, well, I'm tired of gas prices, and some use real strong language. I think it bleep, bleep, bleep. That stupid President Trump, bleep, bleep, bleep. Okay. Well, then you have to decide how to take those words or phrases and put them into categories that express something like don't like it, wouldn't recommend it, all for it. And there's not always agreement in our perception of the use of certain words, right? That is the words that are said and how they're said. Because within a communication, most of the meaning of the communication is not contained in the words itself. It's contained in the presentation of the words, and the tone and the tenor of the voice and the use of the hands, because these become communications. So if I go, like this, and or if I go like this means something completely different. So it is helpful if you have more than one coder looking at this, and to see if there's agreement between what they say or where they say the expressions, into which category they should go. Okay, very important. Okay, R refers to the reliability and is the resulting coefficient. M refers to the number of agreements, meaning the total number of coding decisions that were agreed upon by the two coders. Okay, N refers to the total number of decisions per coder. And N, by the way, in statistics, always typically, 99 times out of 100, there's a stat for you, refers to the number of something. Okay. Scott's pi builds upon the observed agreement by allocating for chance. That is, pi is more rigorous. Pi is more rigorous and accounts for more probability. Okay, that's a perfectly acceptable explanation. Now, what I need to make sure that you do is that you understand what that means, and you can articulate it back in plain, simple English, or talk about it in a short paragraph, or identify it in a multiple choice. Okay, so if you have questions about what these letters represent, and again, come on, we're communication people. Don't get freaked out by this. Okay, we use signals, signs, letters, numbers, facial expressions all the time to convey meaning. It's just another sign used as a signifier to convey the meaning of something. That's it. It's nothing more complicated than that. Don't let it throw you. Okay. Question number 3. According to Stacks et al., what are some of the concerns with computerized coding of content? Because people, it takes time for people to read through things and then make decisions. Computers go faster. Computers don't take lunch breaks. Computers don't want hourly salaries. Computers don't want retirement benefits. Okay. See, by the way of using of using computers in the workplace. I have mixed feelings about this because on the one hand, the business of a business is business. It's just there to make money. And I don't say, oh yeah, let's just the only goal that we have is making money, and then woohoo. No, I mean I just don't expect anything else out of it than that. All right, and I really don't put up with anything else out of it than that. I strongly object. In fact, I avoid businesses that use language that tries to disguise what the nature of a business is. They call you they call you associates, they call you families. I'm like, no, hey, whoa, there's a supermarket chain near where I live and says you're family. I'm like, no, I'm not. Because if I go over to family's house and I reach into the refrigerator, and in your case, the frozen food section, and I pull something out to eat it, I don't have to pay family. I have to pay you. So cut it out. All right. Let's just keep the relationship and the language that we use to describe it within the bounds of what it actually is. So I don't expect this from business, and as such, um, I take time to emphasize relationships and emphasize them more. They're of greater importance that are built on persons and the value of relationship, and then all this commercialization stuff. It's like, meh. I mean, you may or may not have ever noticed that, except for things that are common to us, like Regent, um, I wear clothing that's conspicuously lacking in logos. Just this fleece hoodie thingamawacky. Who made it? Doesn't say. That's on purpose. I'm not a billboard for somebody's business. No, I am most interested in human relations. Um, so they're going to put computers in. Yeah. Do I expect anything more? No. Are they the best option as opposed to people? No. Which takes us back to question number 3. What are some of these problems? Marcel, let's look at you. You went last, so we'll take you here first. Based on Stacks 27 Insights, while computerized coding offers useful tools, it also brings some challenges that can affect the accuracy of the content analysis. Yeah, usefulness, like as in it's fast and it's cheap. What are some of the problems? For example, computers sometimes get tripped up by spelling errors, which can cause them to miss important words or misclassify information. Yeah, or even just standard variations that you and I would go, oh yeah, okay. And this is particularly prominent when you're working cross culturally, and that can be within your own country, or across borders. D might sound like T, so the one is substituted for the other. Okay, which can cause them misimportant words and misclassified information. So they usually depend on exact matches rather than understanding context. And you know this. I mean, if you ever try to look up a file in your computer and you don't have the character string exactly right, like maybe you have a space where you don't want a space or something, it's like, oh, I don't see anything like that. You're like, eh. Additionally, computers struggle to capture subtle nuances in language, such as implied tone, sarcasm, and cultural cues, which can lead to overly simplistic or incorrect coding decisions. And that is extremely important because most of the meaning of a communication is not contained within the words used. Most of the meaning of the communication is contained in how the words are used. All right. Put that little bit of information into your own pocket for not only you as a communicator, but you as an interpreter. When somebody's trying to tell you something, someone's trying to tell you something, listen for what's called the subtext, the communication embedded in, or sometimes described as underneath, excuse me, the communication. We subtext our communications all the time. Most people are unaware that they do it. Even more are unaware of how they are doing it. You crack that code, all right, or at least be aware of it, you will become a master communicator. Lead overly simplistic, incorrect coding. Moreover, interpreting textual images Those figurative or symbolically meaning created through descriptive or pervasive language requires interpretive judgment that computers cannot reliably handle. And you know this, excellent answer, by the way, Marcel. You know this because if you spend any time on YouTube, you know that YouTube has a computer running an algorithm checking for certain content it doesn't want on there as coded by certain words. So instead of, let's say that someone ends their own life. If you're creating YouTube content, and that means me, so got to be careful, and you use a word that comes after the letter R, wink, you might get snagged by the algorithm and get coded to have that video taken down. So instead, people will come up with other ways, like they'll say unalived himself or herself. Okay, they're making an end run around the computer, and the computer is clueless, doesn't even know what's going on. So that is a problem. So it's important to use computerized coding carefully and also include human insights to truly capture meaning, context, and the complexity of that content during research. Okay, excellent answer. All right, everybody. Your part number 2 for your PR assignment is in. I will be grading those over the next couple of days. The sheet for part number 3 is up. All right, and that's not due, I think, until the 10th of April. So you've got some time. Okay, so keep working on those. You're doing great work. All right. Have a look at this week's readings and the discussion questions, some more about qualitative research. And as always, I am thinking about you. I am praying about you, especially some of you who've had some life challenges. And thank you for reaching out to me and asking for prayers. I am praying about you. And as always, until next week, I will see you on Canvas. Take care. God bless. Bye-bye.